Israel carried out multiple airstrikes across Syria, including in Damascus, the Hama military airport, and the T4 military airport in Homs. Israeli simultaneous attacks in Daraa reportedly resulted in 9 civilian casualties. The Syrian interim authorities condemned these attacks, qualifying them as blatant violation of international law and Syrian sovereignty, and an attempt to destabilize Syria. Let me also recall earlier indications by the Damascus authorities, as had been published in numerous media outlets, of not presenting threats to its neighbors and seeking peace on their borders. The Israeli Defense Minister was quoted on 3rd of April as qualifying the recent airstrikes in Syria as a warning for the future, and as he added that Israel would not allow Syria to become a threat to Israel's security interests. Considering these developments, let me recall this Council's presidential statement on 14th of March, which reaffirmed a strong commitment to the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of Syria, and called on all states to respect these principles and to refrain from any action or interference that may further destabilize Syria. This Council's commitment to Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity grows in importance by the day. Syria's opportunities to stabilize after 14 years of conflict must be supported and protected for Syrians and for Israelis. This is the only way regional peace and security can be realized. Mr. President, let me conclude by recalling the statement made by Special Envoy Pedersen on 3rd of April about Israeli military escalation, that such actions undermine efforts to build a new Syria at peace with itself and the region and destabilize Syria at a sensitive time. Syria is at a crossroads and deserves a chance to continue to work towards an inclusive political transition, where the Syrian people can overcome the conflict, revive their economy, realize their legitimate aspirations, and contribute to regional stability. Furthermore, short-term and tactical security actions and gains should not derail prospects for peace agreement between the two neighbors and long-term stability at their internationally recognized border. Je vous remercie.
Thank you.
Je remercie Monsieur le Sous-secrétaire général
I thank
pour ses
the
remarques.
ASG for
Et je
his
donne la
comments,
parole
and I now
à
give the
Monsieur
floor to
le secrétaire
Mr.
général adjoint aux opérations de paix.
Lacroix, the USG for Peace Operations.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie le Conseil de sécurité
I
de
thank the
me
Security
donner l'occasion
Council
de
for
vous
giving
informer
me
de la
this
situation dans la
opportunity
zone
to
d'opération de la
report
Force
to
des
you on the
Nations Unies
situation in
pour
the
l'observation
UNDOF area
du
of
désengagement et de la
operations.
mise en œuvre de son mandat.
UNDOF, the UN
The situation
Disengagement
in the
Observer
UNDOF
Force,
area
in
of operations
implementing
since
its
the
mandate.
closed Security Council consultation on UNDOF on the 19th of March has remained volatile and continues to be characterized by significant violations of the 1974 disengagement of forces agreement with the entry of the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, into the area of separation since the 8th of December. The Israeli Defense Forces currently occupies 12 positions that they established on the Bravo side, 10 in the areas of separation and 2 in the area of limitation in the vicinity of the Bravo line. They also continue to construct counter-mobility obstacles along the ceasefire line and have flown on several occasions aircraft across the ceasefire line and helicopters into the area of separation. The IDF also continue to impose some restrictions of movement on UNDOF and Observer Group Golan personnel in the area of separation. Their restrictions on the movement of people residing in the area also continue. Residents in some areas have protested disruptions from IDS activities, including farming, detention of civilians, and seizure of large numbers of livestock, and we have conveyed these concerns to our Israeli interlocutors. Some residents have also appealed to UNDOF to ask the IDF to leave their villages. Monsieur le Président, dans cet environnement
Mr.
opérationnel
President, in this
difficile, le
difficult
personnel de
operational
la FLEOD,
environment,
soutenu par le groupe
UNDOF
d'observateurs du
personnel
Golan,
supported by
continue
the
de mener à
observer
bien
group
au mieux de ses
Golan
capacités
have continued to
les
carry out
activités
to
qui
the
lui ont
best of
été
their
confiées,
abilities
à savoir
activities
l'observation de la
entrusted
zone de
to it,
séparation et de la
namely
ligne de
observation of
cessez-le-feu
the
à
area of
partir de ses
separation and the
positions,
ceasefire line
ainsi
from
que
their
les
positions, as
patrouilles
well
et
as
les rapports sur
patrols and
l'évolution de la
reports
situation.
on the evolving situation.
Permettez-moi de faire le point sur l'évolution de la
Allow me
situation
to update
sécuritaire
you
dans la
on the
zone
evolving
d'opération
security
de la FLEOD.
situation in UNDOF's
Au cours
area
des
of
dernières
operation.
semaines, le personnel de la FLEOD a
In recent
observé de
weeks, UNDOF
multiples
personnel
explosions
have
du côté
noted
Bravo, qu'il
multiple
a estimé
explosions on the
être une
Bravo
activité
side,
kinétique
which they
significative
deem
liée
to
aux
be
efforts des
significant
forces de
kinetic
défense
activity
d'Israël
linked to the
en vue
efforts of the
de, je
IDF
cite, la
to, and I quote,
démilitarisation du sud de la Syrie.
demilitarize the south of Syria.
On the 27th of March, following an IDF attack on a location in the area of limitation, the IDF stated, and I quote, that during a planned IDF activity, a number of armed individuals opened fire from Kohaya on IDF forces. The IDF sent an aerial instrument to scan the field. The aerial instrument was attacked. Most recently, early morning on the 3rd of April, UNDOF personnel in the area of separation observed IDF troops in vehicles moving in a southeasterly direction on the Bravo side. The UNDOF personnel later heard and observed multiple explosions in the southern part of the area of limitation on the Bravo side. UNDOF assessed these explosions to be a result of the impact of IDF artillery fire, likely in Nawa and Tassil. On the 3rd of April, the IDF informed UNDOF that, and I quote, "In the past few hours, the IDF has struck remaining military capabilities in the areas of the Syrian military bases, Hama and T4, along with additional military infrastructure in the Damascus area. The IDF will continue to act to eliminate any threat to the citizens of the State of Israel," end of quote. Additionally, open sources reported on the 3rd of April incidents of residents in Dera, including Tassil and Nawa, clashing with the IDF convoy that attempted to enter the towns, forcing the convoy to retreat under IDF air cover. UNDOF continues to liaise with both parties and engages on specific issues impacting UNDOF operations and on complaints conveyed to UNDOF by a resident in the area of separation. In their engagement with the UNDOF leadership, senior IDF officials have restated that their presence in the area of separation was necessary to secure it from what they described as terrorist elements, and informed that Israel had no territorial ambitions in Syria. They have reiterated Israel's expectation of the demilitarization of the area southwest of Damascus. On the Bravo side, UNDOF is reinforcing its coordination mechanism through a new liaison arrangement with Syrian authorities. This includes enhancing information sharing protocols and regular consultative meetings. It remains critical that all parties uphold their obligation under the 1974 Disengagement of Forces Agreement, including by ending all unauthorized presence in the areas of separation and limitation, as well as refraining from any action that would undermine the ceasefire and stability on the Syrian Golan. There should be no military forces or activities in the area of separation other than those on UNDOF. All actions that are inconsistent with the agreement are unacceptable. UNDOF must have freedom of movement in its area of operations. The freedom of movement and safety and security of UNDOF and Observer Group Golan personnel conducting their mandated task is of the highest priority. Monsieur le Président, pour finir, je
Mr.
compte sur la
President, in
coopération
conclusion, I
continue des
count
deux
on the
parties pour
continued
que la force
cooperation of
puisse
both
s'acquitter pleinement
parties
de
so
son
that the
mandat.
force can fully carry
La
out its
FLEOD reste
mandate.
essentielle pour la
UNDOF
stabilité du
remains
Golan et de la
essential
région.
for stability in the
Nous
Golan
sommes
and in
reconnaissants
the
au Conseil
region.
de
We are
sécurité
grateful
pour le
to the
soutien
Security
continu
Council
qu'il
for the
apporte à la
continued
FLEOD
support
et je
provided to
réitère que
UNDOF,
ce soutien
and I
unanime est
reiterate
plus
that
que
this
nécessaire,
unanimous support
plus que
is
jamais
needed
nécessaire
now more
dans
than
cette
ever
période difficile.
in this
Je vous
difficult
remercie.
time. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le
I
Secrétaire général
thank
adjoint,
the
pour son
USG
intervention. Et je donne maintenant la parole
for
aux
his
membres du
comments,
Conseil
and
qui
I
souhaitent faire
give
une
the floor
déclaration.
to council members wishing to speak.
Je donne la parole à
I
Monsieur le
give the
représentant
floor
permanent de
to the
l'Algérie.
permanent representative of Algeria.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the members of the A3+, namely Guyana, Sierra Leone, Somalia, and my own country, Algeria. At the outset, we would like to thank USG Jean-Pierre Lacroix and ASG Khaled Khiari for their valuable briefings. Mr. President, the A3+ is concerned about the military escalations by Israel in Syria, which are taking place at a critical period of Syria's history and exacerbate the already fragile situation in this country. We understand that the recent airstrikes have reportedly resulted in 9 civilians' casualties and damage the civilian infrastructure. The A3+ strongly condemn these military operations that violate international law, including the United Nations Charter, in particular Article 2.4, which prohibits the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. In this regard, we stress the importance of ensuring full respect for Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity. We also echo the Special Envoy's concern that such actions undermines efforts to build a new Syria that is at peace with itself, at peace with the region. It is crucial to highlight that Syria has neither threatened nor attacked Israel. Furthermore, we must recognize that the ongoing violence exacerbates the humanitarian crisis, which has already displaced millions and left countless others in desperate need of assistance. It is vital to reiterate that both civilians and civilian infrastructure must be protected in accordance with international humanitarian law. The A3+ is further concerned about the impact that the destruction of Syria's military capabilities would have on the country's stability and its ability to ensure security, to combat terrorism effectively. The A3+ reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the unity, to the sovereignty, to the independence, and to the territorial integrity of Syria. These principles must be respected by all, under all circumstances. Upholding international law is not a matter of choice, but an obligation. And this escalatory action of Israel, compounded by inflammatory statement by Israeli officials about the, and I quote, indefinite presence of their forces in Syrian territory, are contributing to instability and threatening regional peace and security. The A3+ therefore calls for, first, the immediate cessation of attacks against Syria's infrastructures. Such actions destabilize the country and may incite further unrest and conflict among neighboring countries. Second, full respect for the 1974 disengagement agreement, including provisions related to the zone of separation. In this regard, we underscore that there should be no military forces, no military equipment or personnel in the area of separation other than those of UNDOF. Third, an end to the Israeli incursion and the complete withdrawal of its forces from Syria's territory. We emphasize that the Golan Heights is an occupied Syrian territory, as reaffirmed by Security Council Resolution 497. This Security Council must uphold its resolutions and ensure complete compliance by all parties. Mr. President, the A3+ stands ready to work with all member states to ensure a peaceful resolution to the ongoing crisis in Syria, prioritizing the needs and aspirations of the Syrian people. The prosperity of Syria is critical to the stability of the entire region. Any action by external actors that jeopardizes Syria's security must be condemned by the international community. Rebuilding Syria requires an investment in dialogue, not sanction. Enhanced collaboration, not aggression. And steadfast support, not desertion. The international community must echo the calls of the Syrian people by mobilizing necessary resources, lifting unilateral sanctions, and providing required support to Syria. I thank you.
Je remercie Monsieur le représentant
I thank the
permanent
permanent
de l'Algérie pour
representative
son
of Algeria
intervention au
for
nom de la
his statement on
3+.
behalf of the
Et je donne la
A3+, and
parole
I
à
now
Monsieur le
give the floor
représentant de
to
la
the
Chine.
distinguished representative of China.
主席，我感谢
President,
拉克鲁瓦副秘书
I
长
thank
还有
USG
基亚利助
Lacqua
理秘书
and
长的通
ASG
报。
Chiari for their briefings.
去年12月，以
In
色列
December
打着
last
有
year,
限和临时
under
性
the
行动的旗
pretext
号，
of a
在
quote-unquote
叙
limited
利亚
and
以色列军事
temporary
隔离区
operation,
部署
Israel
部队，
deployed
并持
troops
续至
in the
今。
Israeli-Syrian area of
期间，以
separation
色列军
and has
队
maintained
频
the
繁空
deployment
袭
to this
叙
day.
利亚，
During this
在
period,
叙利
the
亚南
Israeli
部地区
military has
推进所
frequently
谓
conducted
非军事
airstrikes
化。
against Syria, promoting the so-called
上周，以色列
demilitarization
对叙
in
利亚
southern
境内
Syria.
多处目
Last
标
week,
发动空
Israel
袭，
launched airstrikes on
造成
multiple
重大人员
targets
伤亡
within Syria,
和设施
causing
损毁。
significant casualties and damage
以
to
方的行为严
facilities.
重违反国际法，
Israel's actions
严重侵犯
severely
叙利亚的主
violate
权、
international law
统一
and
和领
infringe
土完整
upon。the sovereignty, unity,
我
and
们对此
territorial integrity
表
of
示
Syria.
谴责，
We condemn these actions
敦促以色
and
列
urge
立即
Israel to
停止攻
withdraw
击行为，
to
并尽快
immediately
从叙利亚
put
领
an
土
end
撤
to
出。
these attacks and to withdraw from Syria territory as
1974
soon
年
as
部队
possible.
脱离接触协
The
议，
1974
应当得到遵
disengagement
守。
agreement should be
连
upheld,
拖部队根据
and
授
the
权履
fulfillment
职
of
应当
UNDOF's
得到保障
mandate。should be ensured.
当前，叙利
At
亚局势
present,
的发展
the
处于
situation
重
in
要
Syria
和敏感阶
remains
段。
at an important and sensitive
平稳实现
stage.
政治过渡
A
是叙
smooth
利亚恢
political
复和平
transition
稳
is
定
the
的关
key
键，
to restoring peace and
也
stability
应
in
当成为
Syria
各方
and should be
共
the
同努力的
primary
首要
goal
目
of
标。
the joint efforts of all
我们
parties.
希望叙利亚
We
临时
hope
当
that the
局
Syrian
遵照
interim
安理会
authorities
第
will
2254号决
follow
议确
the
定的原则，
principles set out in
同
Council
叙利亚各
Resolution
界开展
2254
广泛
and
对话协
engage
商，
in broad
推
dialogue
动包
consultation
容
with
的
all
政
sectors
治
in
进程。
Syria to promote an inclusive
在此
political
方面，
process.
我们
In
呼
this
吁各
regard,
方积极
we
支
call
持
all
配合
parties to
裴凯
actively
卢特使的
support
工
and
作。
cooperate with the work of Special
我
Envoy
们敦促叙
Patterson.
利亚临时当
We
局
urge the
以透
Syrian
明、
interim
负责任的
authorities
方
to
式
advance
推进对沿海
investigations
地区
into
暴力
the
事件的调
coastal
查，
violence
及
incidents in a
时公布调
transparent
查
and
结果，
responsible manner
接
with the
受
timely
国际
release
社会
of
的
the
监督。
results and under the oversight of the
我还
international
要
community.
再次强调，
I also want to reiterate
叙利亚
that
临时
the
当局
Syrian
应
interim
当履行
authorities
反
should
恐义务，
fulfill its
采取果断措施，
counterterrorism obligations
打击包括
and
东伊
take
运
decisive
及
measures
突
to
厥伊
combat
斯兰
all
党在内
council-listed
的
terrorist
所有
organizations,
被安理
including
会
the
列名的
ETIM, also
恐怖
known
组织。
as the Turkestan Islamic Party.
主席，
President,
自本轮巴以
since
冲
the
突爆发以
outbreak
来，
of the
中
current
东
round
地
of
区
the
深陷动荡
Israeli-Palestinian
不
conflict,
安。
the Middle East has
近
been
期以
mired
色列不
in
顾
deep
国际社会
turmoil.
强烈反对，
Recently,
在加
Israel,
沙重启
ignoring
战
strong
端，
opposition
地区
from
的
the
安全
international
稳定
community, has
面临
resumed
更
military
多挑
operations
战，
in Gaza, posing
令人
further
深
challenges
感
to
担忧。
regional security and stability,
我们
which
敦
is
促有关
deeply
各方
concerning.
保持冷静
We
克
urge
制，
all parties
摒
concerned
弃
to
武
exercise
力
calm
直
and
面，
restraint,
避
abandon the
免
obsession
采取
with the
加
use
剧
of
地
force,
区紧张局势
refrain
的
from
行动，
actions that could
重回
exacerbate
政治解
tensions
决
in the
的
region,
正确轨道，
return to the right
通
track
过
of a
对话
political
谈
settlement,
判
and
化
resolve
解
their
分歧。
differences through dialogue and
国际
negotiation.
社会，特
The
别是
international
有影响
community,
力的国家，
especially
应当加大
influential
外交努力，
countries, should step
为
up
冲突的
diplomatic
政治解
efforts
决
and
发挥
play
积
an
极
active
和
and
负责任的
responsible
作用。
role in the political settlement of the
中方愿
conflict.
同国际社会
China
一
is
道，
ready to
继
work
续
with the
为推
international
动叙利
community
亚
to
实现
continue to
长治
make
久安，
unremitting efforts
中东
to
地区
promote
恢复
long-lasting peace
和
and
平安
stability
宁
in Syria
做
and
出
to
不
restore
懈努
peace
力
and。tranquility in the Middle East.
谢谢。
Thank you, President.
Je remercie
I
Monsieur le
thank
représentant de la
the
Chine. Je
representative
donne la
of China,
parole
and then I give the
à Monsieur
floor
le
to
représentant
the
permanent du
permanent
Pakistan.
representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. We thank you for convening this urgent meeting requested by Algeria and Somalia in response to the latest wave of Israeli aggression against the Syrian Arab Republic. We also thank Under-Secretary General Jean-Pierre Lacroix and Assistant Secretary General Khalid Khiari for their briefings. Pakistan is deeply alarmed by Israel's ongoing and escalating attacks on sovereign Syrian territory. These strikes represent a flagrant violation of the UN Charter, international law, relevant Security Council resolutions, and the 1974 Disengagement Agreement. The recent airstrikes targeting multiple locations in Syria, including civilian infrastructure and urban centers, have caused civilian casualties and pose a grave threat to regional and international peace and security. Such actions further undermine Syria's pursuit of political stabilization and national reconciliation, objectives that are supported by this Council and the wider international community. We echo Special Envoy Pedersen's strong condemnation of these military escalations. As he rightly stated, they undermine efforts to build a new Syria at peace with itself and the region. His warning must be taken seriously. Mr. President, we are witnessing a deeply troubling pattern: continued unprovoked Israeli military aggression, repeated violations of the disengagement agreement, and illegal military presence in the area of separation, and open declarations of indefinite occupation. This blatant disregard for Syria's unity, sovereignty, and territorial integrity must be unequivocally condemned. The Secretary General's latest report also highlighted how Israeli restrictions have severely hampered UNDOF's ability to fulfill its mandate, including planned patrols and freedom of movement. The 1974 Disengagement Agreement remains binding. No force other than UNDOF should be present between the Alpha and Bravo lines. Any unilateral violation of this agreement is unacceptable. Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity must be fully respected. Israel's occupation of the Syrian Golan remains illegal, and as per Security Council Resolution 497, is null and void. The Council must demand Israel's complete withdrawal from the occupied Golan Heights. The Security Council cannot allow illegal military actions to set dangerous precedents. The presidential statement of 14th March reaffirmed Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity and urged all members to uphold these principles. Israel's actions are in direct violation of this consensus. The Council must act decisively and ensure accountability. Mr. President, Pakistan remains attached to the principle of Syrian-led, Syrian-owned political process grounded in the principles contained in Resolution 2254. Sustainable peace in Syria depends on the inclusive political transition, national unity, and reconciliation. Recent progress, including the formation of a transitional government, adoption of an interim constitution, and integration of civil and military institutions, must not be derailed by external military interference. The humanitarian consequences of these attacks are devastating. With over 16 million people already in need, the deliberate targeting of civilian areas and infrastructure only deepens the crisis and violates the core principles of international humanitarian law. We are equally concerned about the broader regional implications. Continued escalation risks igniting wider conflict at a time when diplomacy, de-escalation, and reconstruction must be the priority. The Council must send a clear and united message. Violations of sovereignty cannot be normalized, and the principles of the UN Charter must be upheld. We've listened carefully to USG Lacroix and Assistant Secretary General Chiari. These are serious findings on which the Security Council should pronounce, since the Council's calls are not being heeded to. We are ready to work with Council members and the pen holders in this regard. In conclusion, Pakistan stands in full solidarity with the brotherly people of Syria. We reaffirm our unwavering commitment to Syria's sovereignty, political independence, and the right of its people to live in peace, security, and dignity, free from occupation and external aggression. I thank you.
Je remercie le
I
représentant permanent du
thank the foreign
Pakistan pour sa
representative of
déclaration. Je
Pakistan
donne
for
la
his
parole à
statement, and I now
Madame
give
la
the floor
représentante des
to the
États-Unis.
representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, Assistant Secretary General Chiari and Undersecretary General Lacroix, for your briefings. As Council members, we should all agree that a stable and sovereign Syria is critical for our collective security. President Trump met with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu earlier this week, and they had a constructive discussion on the importance of regional peace, security, and stability. The United States shares Israel's concerns about Syria becoming a base for terrorism, and both our countries have been clear that we oppose malign actors using Syria as a platform to foment instability. We know that ISIS and al-Qaeda continue to plot and conduct attacks within Syria. And we know Hezbollah and other Iran-backed terrorists are trying to regain a foothold in Syria to threaten Israel and other regional states. And we know that terrorists, both Syrian and foreign, were complicit in last month's atrocities in western Syria. In this context, Israel has an inherent right of self-defense, including against terrorist groups operating close to its border. We welcome the Syrian permanent representative's March 3 letter to the Council, stating that Syria will not be a haven for terrorism, nor will it be a part of any axes or polarization or become involved in any conflicts or wars that threaten the security and stability of the region. This is a positive message of intent by the interim authorities. As we have said since December 8th, we will judge the Syrian interim authorities not by their words, though, but by their actions. The United States continues to support efforts that will bring lasting stability between Israel and Syria, and we hope to see a restoration of calm so Syrians can live in peace with their neighbors. Broad and enduring stability in Syria will also depend on advancing justice and accountability. We know this is true not only for American families whose loved ones have gone missing in Syria, but indeed for all whose loved ones have been missing. We continue to call on the interim authorities to respect human rights and fundamental freedoms for all, protect minorities, and advance accountability for brutal crimes, including the recent atrocities in Western Syria. We have welcomed recent statements by both Israel and Turkey that they do not seek conflict with one another in Syria. The Council should recommit itself to combating terrorism in Syria, call on Iran and other external actors to stop arming and advising terrorist groups, and urge regional states to rein in the actions of proxies who threaten regional peace and security. Thank you.
Je remercie Madame la représentante
I
des
thank the
États-Unis pour sa
representative of the United
déclaration et je
States
donne la
for her
parole
statement,
à
and I
la
give the floor to the
représentante de
representative
la
of Slovenia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wish to thank USG Lacroix and USG Chiari for their briefings. Mr. President, 4 months ago, Syrians opened a new chapter, bringing hope for a more stable and secure future. It is clear that many serious challenges lie ahead and will need to be addressed on the path of building a new Syria. Let me make 2 points in this regard. First, a peaceful and secure Syria is in interests of all Syrians, its immediate neighbors, and the wider region. It is equally in the interest of the entire international community. The best way to achieve it is through diplomacy and dialogue. Once again, we urge all parties to refrain from violence and to exercise maximum restraint at this critical juncture. We call on all the states with influence to use it to that end and to promote dialogue and confidence building. Mr. President, we have been saying this for years and we remain resolute. It is vital that Syria's sovereignty, territorial integrity, independence, and unity are fully respected. Syrian people need peace and our firm support. So we reiterate our unwavering call for the full respect of international law, including international humanitarian and human rights law. We acknowledge the interest of countries in the immediate neighborhood to ensure that events in Syria do not pose risk to their security. However, we remain convinced that external military interventions in the fragile moment of Syrian transition do not contribute to this legitimate objective. Indeed, they could have a counter effect. In this vein, we condemn the repeated and intensifying Israeli military escalations in Syria, which risk undermining an already fragile security situation in Syria and beyond. We call on Israel to immediately cease the bombings and to withdraw from the zone of separation defined by the 1974 disengagement agreement. UNDOF must be fully able to carry out its mandate, including freedom of movement. Ceasefire must be preserved and the agreement implemented. Besides being illegal, prolonged Israeli incursions risk undermining the transition process in Syria, aggravate tensions, and risk destabilizing the region. Second, an inclusive political transition is in the interests of both the Syrian leadership and Syrian people. We take note of recent developments toward political transition, including the unveiling of a new and expanded cabinet. In this regard, we encourage the interim authorities to continue working toward a credible, inclusive, and sustainable transition, one grounded in good governance and transparency. This includes the formation of a provisional legislative council and a committee to draft the new constitution, as well as preparations for free and fair elections. This should be in line with relevant international standards and the key principles of the Security Council Resolution 2254. In conclusion, Mr. President, let me reiterate, in a highly unstable regional environment, Syria has a historic opportunity to become a center of peace and security. That requires proactive engagement by all stakeholders. In Syria, it requires the interim authorities to make the right decisions based on an inclusive national dialogue for the benefit of all Syrian people and in full respect of their human rights and freedoms. It also requires increased and continuous regional and international support. And again, it requires respect for the independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of Syria. Slovenia remains ready to work with others, both in this Council and elsewhere, to assist Syrians in realizing a new Syria, free, inclusive, and secure in a secure and stable region. I thank you.
Je remercie Madame la représentante de Slovénie
I thank the
pour son
representative
intervention
of
et je
Slovenia
donne la
for her
parole à
statement.
Monsieur
I
le
now give the
représentant
floor
permanent
to
du
the
Panama.
permanent representative of Panama.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Panamá agradece la convocatoria
Panama
de esta
welcomes the
sesión de
holding of
emergencia
this emergency meeting
solicitada por
at
Argelia
the
y
request
Somalia
of Algeria and
sobre la
Somalia
situación en
on the
Siria.
situation in Syria,
Valora los informes
and we welcome the
presentados por el
reports
subsecretario
provided
general
by
para
the
Oriente
ASG for the Middle
Medio,
East,
Asia y el Pacífico,
Asia, and the Pacific, Mohammed
Chiari,
Khaled
y
Chiari,
por el secretario
and
general
by
adjunto de operaciones de paz,
USG for Peace
Jean-Pierre
Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix.
cuyas explicaciones nos han
Their
actualizado
explanations have
sobre
given us an
incidentes
update on
recientes
recent
que resultan
incidents
preocupantes.
which are disturbing.
Nuestro país reitera su
Our
firme
country
compromiso
reiterates its strong
con los principios de
commitment
la
to the
Carta de las
principles of
Naciones
the UN
Unidas,
Charter,
en
in
particular
particular,
el respeto a la
respect for
soberanía, la
sovereignty,
independencia,
independence,
la unidad y
unity,
la
and
integridad
territorial
de toda la
integrity
extensión territorial
of
de
the
la
entire
República
territorial
Árabe Siria,
extension of the Syrian
así
Arab
como su
Republic,
derecho
as well
inalienable
as
a decidir
its
su
inalienable
futuro
right to
sin
determine its
injerencias
future
externas de ningún
without
tipo
any
y de
form of
conformidad con el
foreign
derecho
interference and
internacional.
in accordance with international
El
law.
pasado 1 de marzo
On the 1st of
se
March,
anunció la formación de un nuevo
the
gobierno en
formation
Siria.
of a new government in Syria was
Consideramos que esta
announced.
nueva etapa
We believe that
representa una
this new
oportunidad
phase is an
para avanzar hacia
opportunity
un
to
proceso
work
político
towards an
inclusivo
inclusive political
que garantice la
process,
participación de
guaranteeing the
todos los
participation of
ciudadanos
all
sin
citizens
distinción de su
without
origen
distinction
étnico, credo o
with
género,
regard to their
y que
ethnic
contribuya de
origin,
manera
belief
efectiva a la
system, or
estabilidad y
gender,
seguridad
and
de
which will
Siria
contribute
y de la
effectively
región.
to stability and
Siria
security
requiere de
for
la
Syria and the
asistencia
region.
y el compromiso
Syria
firme
needs the
de la
assistance and the firm
comunidad
commitment
internacional.
of the international
Tras
community.
14 años
After
de
14
cruenta
years
guerra
of a
civil,
cruel civil
es
war,
preciso acompañar a los
Syrians
sirios
need
en
help
la construcción de una
rebuilding
gobernabilidad efectiva
effective
que
governance,
evite la
which does
infiltración de
not allow for
influencias
infiltration
extremistas en
by
su política
extremist
y
influences in
combata
their
el
politics,
desarrollo de actividades de
and
grupos
help
terroristas
fighting the
en su
development
territorio.
of terrorist group activities in
Panamá
their
se une al
territory.
llamado realizado
Panama
por el enviado especial de las
endorses the
Naciones
appeal
Unidas,
made by the
quien
UN
subrayó la
Special
necesidad
Envoy, who
urgente de
underscored the
prevenir
urgent
cualquier
need to
nuevo
prevent
ciclo de
any new
violencia
cycle of
en
violence
Siria
in Syria
y de enfocar los
and to focus
esfuerzos en el
efforts
fomento de la
on promoting
confianza,
trust,
la inclusión y la
inclusion,
recuperación
and
económica.
economic recovery.
De igual manera, Panamá expresa
Similarly,
su profunda
Panama
preocupación
expresses its
ante
profound
los
concern
recientes ataques
at
aéreos
recent
registrados
attacks,
en
air
distintas
attacks,
regiones de Siria
which have taken
que
place
han
in different
afectado
regions of
infraestructuras
Syria. They have
estratégicas,
affected strategic
incluidas
infrastructure,
instalaciones de
including
investigación científica,
scientific research
aeropuertos y
facilities,
otras áreas
airports,
de
and other
importancia
areas
militar
of
y
military and
civil.
civilian importance.
Hechos reportados por
Events reported
diversas
by
fuentes
different sources
causan preocupación por distintas razones,
cause concern for a
sobre
number
todo
of
cuando
reasons,
han provocado
particularly
numerosas
when they
víctimas,
result in mass
daños materiales
casualties,
significativos
significant material
y han
damage,
generado un
and when they
clima
have
de
generated a
incertidumbre
climate of
y de
greater
mayor
uncertainty
inestabilidad
and
en un
greater
momento
instability
particularmente
at a
delicado para el
particularly
país.
delicate time for the country.
Lamentamos
We
especialmente el
particularly regret
impacto que
the
esta
impact that
situación
this
está teniendo
situation
sobre la
is having
población
on the
civil
civilian
y
population,
subrayamos la
and we
importancia de
underscore the importance
garantizar
of
en todo
guaranteeing at all
momento
times
la protección de los
protection for
civiles
civilians
y de respetar
and strict respect
estrictamente el derecho
for
internacional humanitario.
international humanitarian law.
Panamá toma nota
Panama
de los
takes
reportes
note
recientes
of
de la
the
Fuerza de las Naciones
recent
Unidas de Observación de la
reports by the UN
Separación,
Disengagement
quien llevó
Observer
a cabo
Force,
una misión de
which carried
inspección
out an
en varias
inspection
localidades
mission
del sur
in a
de
number of
Siria,
areas in the south of
incluyendo
Syria,
zonas en la
including
provincia de
areas
Dadaab,
in the province of
afectadas
Dadaab,
por los ataques de la semana
impacted by
pasada.
last week's
El
attacks.
acceso logrado
access granted to UNDOF and UNDOF's observations have reported on the seriousness of damage in key areas, both military and civilian. Panama reaffirms its support, Mr. President, for the verification and monitoring activities carried out by the UN forces. They are essential to preserve stability, guarantee compliance with international agreements, and to protect the most vulnerable communities. Thank you.
Je remercie Monsieur le représentant permanent du Panama pour sa déclaration et je donne la parole à Monsieur le représentant permanent de la Fédération de Russie.
Господин председатель,
Thank you, Mr. President.
Признательны
We
помощнику
are
генерального
grateful to
секретаря
Assistant
ООН по
Secretary
вопросам
General
Ближнего
for
Востока,
the Middle East,
Азии
Asia, and the Pacific, Khalid Hiari,
и заместителю
as well
генерального
as the
секретаря по
Undersecretary
операциям
General for
«Пользу миру»
Peace
Жан-Пьеру
Operations,
Лекруа
Jean-Pierre
за
Lacroix,
развернутые доклады
for
о
their
ситуации в
detailed
Сирии.
reports about the situation in Syria.
Считаем
We
сегодняшнее
view
срочное
today's
заседание,
emergency
запрошенное
meeting,
нашими
which was
алжирскими
requested by
и
our
сомалийскими
Algerian and
коллегами
Somalian
для
colleagues
поддержки арабской
with the
группы,
support of the
весьма
Arab group,
своевременно.
as very timely.
За 4
In the
месяца с
4
момента
months
смены
since
власти
the
в
change of
Дамаске
power in
Израиль
Damascus,
нанес уже
Israel
более
has already carried
700
out
ударов
more
по
than
Сирии.
700 strikes targeting
В
Syria.
последнее время география
Recently, the
обстрелов
geographical
расширилась.
span
Огонь, в
of these
частности,
strikes has
попали
expanded.
военный аэродром
The
Хама,
Hama
также
air
военные
base,
объекты в
as
районе
well
Пальмиры.
as military bases in Palmyra, have also been
Израильтяне сохраняют
targeted.
контроль над
The
буферной
Israelis
зоной,
maintain
оккупированной
control
после 8
of the
декабря
buffer zone, which has been
2024
occupied
года, а также над
since
значительной
after 8
частью
December
южных сирийских
2024, and they also
территорий.
occupy vast swathes of the
Вызывает
south of
тревогу и
Syrian
заявления
territory. We have
высокопоставленных
been
израильских
alarmed by
лиц о
statements
необходимости
made by
демилитаризации юга
senior
Сирии и о
Israeli
том, что
officials about
армия
the need to
обороны Израиля
demilitarize the south of
планирует
Syria
остаться в
and
стране
about
на
the IDF's
неопределенное время.
plans to remain in the country indefinitely.
Эти действия
These
представляют собой грубое нарушение
actions
суверенитета и
are a
территориальной
gross
целостности Сирии, которые ни
violation
в коем
of
случае не
Syrian
должны
sovereignty and
подвергаться
territorial
сомнению,
integrity,
вне
which under
зависимости от
no
того, кто
circumstances
находится у
need to be
власти в
called
Дамаске.
into question, regardless of who holds
В
power in
этом контексте
Damascus. In this
стоит выделить
context,
заявление Ахмеда Шара,
worth
который еще
noting is the
16
statement
января
delivered by
подтвердил
Ahmed
приверженность
Shara.
своей страны
On the 16th
соглашению
of
о
January, he
разъединении
confirmed his country's
1974
commitment to the
года,
1974
а также
Disengagement of
готовность
Forces
принимать и
Agreement
защищать
and the
миротворцев.
willingness and readiness to host
Да
and
и в
defend
целом, несмотря на
peacekeepers. And on the
провокационные
whole,
израильские
despite
действия,
Israeli
новые
acts
сирийские
of
власти
provocation, the new
по-прежнему не
Syrian authorities
демонстрируют
continue
враждебных
not
намерений
to
по
demonstrate
отношению к
hostile
Израилю
intent
и не
vis-à-vis
создают
Israel,
каких-либо
and they
реальных
do
угроз его
not
национальной
pose any real
безопасности.
threats to its national
Хотели бы
security.
напомнить, что
We wish to
принятым в
recall
марте по
that
инициативе
in
России и
March, at
Соединенных
Russia
Штатов
and the
заявлении
U.S.'s
председателя
initiative,
Совета
a
Безопасности
presidential
содержится
statement was
пункт
adopted.
4, в
Paragraph
котором
4 of this
ко
statement
всем
states,
государствам
calls
обращен
upon all
недвусмысленный
states
призыв воздерживаться от
clearly
любых
to
действий,
refrain from
которые
any
могут
action
привести
that may
к дальнейшей
further
дестабилизации
destabilize
Сирии и
Syria
вмешательству в
or
ее внутренние
interference
дела.
in its domestic affairs.
При этом постоянный
Furthermore,
представитель
the
Израиля
permanent
при ООН
representative of
Дани Данон
Israel
еще
to the
9
UN, Danny
декабря
Danon, on the 9th
2024
of
года
December
направил в адрес
2024,
Генерального секретаря
sent
ООН и
to
председателя Совета
the Secretary General of the
Безопасности
UN and the President of
в
the Security
котором
Council a letter
утверждалось о временном,
describing
ограниченном
as,
и оборонительном
describing as
характере
temporary,
принятых
limited, and
армией Израиля мер
defensive
на юге
the
Сирии,
nature of the
в том
measures
числе в
undertaken by the
районе
Israeli
дислокации
army in the
миротворцев
south of
сил
Syria,
ООН по
including in the
наблюдению за
deployment area
разъединениями
of
Ливана.
UNDOF forces.
Призываем
We
израильскую
call
сторону на
upon
практике
the Israeli
подтвердить
side to, in
заявленную в
practice,
письме
reaffirm the
приверженность
commitment
соглашению
set
о
out
разъединении
in
по
the
международному
letter
праву
to
и
the
безо всяких
disengagement
условий
agreement and to
незамедлительно вернуться
international
к выполнению
law,
данной
and to,
договоренности.
without any preconditions,
В практическом
immediately
плане речь
revert
идет
back to
именно
compliance
речь идет
therewith.
об отводе
At the
израильских
practical
военных
level, this
формирований и
includes the
прекращении
withdrawal of Israeli
произвольных
army
обстрелов.
units and the termination of arbitrary
В целом
strikes.
считаем
On
пагубными
the
для
whole, we view as
безопасности всего
nefarious
Ближнего
for the
Востока
security of the
любые
entire
попытки
Middle East, any
дестабилизировать Сирию и
attempts to
подорвать усилия
destabilize
по
Syria
нормализации
or
ситуации в
derail
этой стране.
efforts to normalize towards normalization
Только
of the situation
сильные,
in the
единые,
country.
процветающие,
Only a
независимые Сирии,
strong,
где будут
united,
соблюдаться права
prosperous,
всех
and
этнорелигиозных
independent
меньшинств,
Syria, with
будет
respect
общим
for the
домом
rights
для
of all
всех сирийцев.
ethno-religious minorities,
Сирия,
will be a home
которая
for
пойдет
all
по пути
Syrians. A
национального
Syria that
примирения
embarks
с
upon
единой
the
армией и
path
службой
towards
безопасности,
national reconciliation with the
сформированными в том числе
unified
с
army and
включением
security forces, with, among
опытных
others,
сирийских профессионалов.
experienced Syrian
Сирия,
professionals in their ranks, a
станет надежным
Syria
и
that will
предсказуемым
become a
соседом для всех
reliable and
государств
predictable
региона.
partner for all states in the region.
Решительно
We
осуждаем
strongly
любые
condemn
попытки
any
воспользоваться
attempts to
периодом политической
exploit
трансформации
the
и
period of
экономической
political
неопределенности для
transformation
навязывания
and economic
сирийцам
uncertainty to impose
чужих и чуждых
foreign
установок.
and alien directives upon the Syrian
Подобные
people.
действия не только
Not
не
only only such actions will be detrimental to ordinary civilians, but they may generate centrifugal processes and spawn prolonged chaos. This must be prevented. Furthermore, reaffirm our unchanging and principled position about the sovereignty of Syria over the Golan Heights. We believe that lasting normalization of the situation in Syria is only possible through inclusive intra-Syrian dialogue, which is geared towards the achievement of national consensus in the advancement of a comprehensive political settlement in accordance with the core principles which are enshrined in Security Council Resolution 2254. We believe that the UN needs to play a key role in accompanying the Syrian-led and Syrian-owned political process. We extend our support for the efforts of the UN Special Envoy, Geir Peterson, and we call upon the Syrian authorities to proactively engage with Mr. Peterson. Mr. President, we wish to separately draw attention to the importance of a transparent and an objective investigation into the recent wave of violence in the coastal regions of Latakia and Tartus, where hundreds, if not thousands, of Alawite, Christian, and other ethnic and religious minority civilians were wounded and killed. We are awaiting the results of the work of the relevant commission which has been put together by the Syrian authorities, the results of which must be promptly brought to the attention of the membership of the Security Council. This demand is also set out in the relevant presidential statement, which inter alia emphasizes the need to expeditiously hold all perpetrators to account. Only on this sound, just, and inclusive foundation is it possible to build a new Syria where the rights of all ethno-religious minorities and all citizens of the country will be upheld. We trust that the Syrian authorities will adopt a constructive approach vis-à-vis implementation of the provisions of the above-mentioned presidential statement. Mr. President, the Russian Federation is a loyal, tried and true friend of the Syrian people. We have been and continue to uphold the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of Syria. We genuinely hope that the Syrians will adopt and implement the right decisions that will guarantee political and social stability in the country, as well as its progressive and sustained development for the benefit of all residents of that state, barring none. We stand ready to help to achieve this as a permanent member of the Security Council, as well as bilaterally. Thank you. I thank the permanent representative of the Russian Federation for his statement, and I now give the floor to the permanent representative of Greece.
Let me start by thanking our briefers, Assistant Secretary General Chiari and Under Secretary General Lacroix, for the valuable information they have provided. Today, I would like to highlight the following 3 points. First, the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Syria must be respected by all. Syrian sovereignty has been systematically violated. We reiterated our call for the full implementation of the 1974 disengagement agreements and emphasized the responsibility of all parties to uphold international obligations. While we recognize the right of Israel to defend itself and ensure the security of its citizens, we stress the need for this to be done in accordance with international law with the utmost care to avoid civilian casualties. We express our condolences for those deceased and pray for the speedy recovery of those injured. We similarly draw attention to violations of Syrian sovereignty in the north, coupled with ongoing violations and kinetic activities, further exacerbating Syrian stability. We deplore attacks in Syria north and northeast, among others on the Tishrim Dam, which is key for local water security. Greece continues to stand firmly in support of Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity, stressing that a united, secure and peaceful Syria is the best way to ensure the well-being of its people and regional stability for Syria and its neighbors. Second, a truly inclusive political transition combined with transitional justice is the key to viable peace in the country. Following the fall of the previous regime in Syria, Greece remains steadfast in its solidarity with the Syrian people as we work toward the recovery of the country. This recovery can only be achieved through a truly inclusive political transition, one that is guided by the principle of Security Council Resolution 2254, supporting the formation of credible and resilient state institutions which respect international law and the international law of the sea. The protection of the full integration of all Syrian communities, including Christian, Alawites, Druze and Kurds, is key for rational reconciliation and the long-term prosperity of the country. We are encouraged by the recent engagement between interim President al-Shara and Special Envoy Pedersen on the importance of a transparent election process for an interim People's Assembly. The atrocities committed in the coastal regions, as condemned by this Council's presidential statement of 14th of March, underscore the urgency for full accountability and inclusive justice. This is crucial for the credibility of the interim authorities. In this regard, we eagerly expect the outcome of the independent fact-finding committee set up to identify those responsible for the mass killings and bring them to justice. We also reaffirm our support to the independent international impartial and objective mechanism, the international impartial mechanism, and the Commission of Inquiry, all critical UN mechanisms in terms of accountability. On the constitutional declaration and political transition, we take note of the formation of the transitional government in Damascus, and we consider the inclusion of a representative of ethnic and religious group to be crucial for its success. We likewise note, however, that these developments were not met with universal acceptance of all communities, and there might still be some question marks on how representative the makeup of this transitional government is. We are equally concerned that, among others, the increased influence of the executive power on the formation of the legislative authority may not lead to a truly inclusive and viable political process. Third and last point, we must not lose sight of the humanitarian crisis in Syria. Recognizing the severe humanitarian crisis in the country, Greece made at the recent recovery conference in Brussels a pledge in support of Syria's recovery, contributed to the EU overall commitment of some 2.5 billion euros, tangibly reflecting a commitment to help rebuild Syria. Within the EU, Greece has supported the easing of sanctions, while emphasizing that this should be done in a gradual, conditional, and reversible manner. This approach is taken in solidarity with the Syrian people as a means to ensure that expectations are met in terms of an inclusive transition, accountability, transitional justice, as well as full adherence to international law, including the international law of the sea. Mr. President, in closing, let me stress that the only viable future for Syria is one of peace, justice, and inclusiveness. Greece remains committed to supporting a political transition that respects the rights of all of Syria's diverse community, advances the prosperity and security of the Syrian people, and ensures regional stability. For this purpose, we must continue to uphold Syria's unity, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, free from external influence and interventions. I thank you.
I thank the
Permanent Representative of Greece for his statement. I give the floor to the Permanent Representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I thank Assistant Secretary General Chiari and Under Secretary General Lacroix for their briefings and for their continued efforts to support stability in Syria. As we've heard, the situation in Syria remains volatile. This was shockingly clear 1 month ago, when violence and widespread killings of civilians rocked Syria's coastal region. Denmark strongly condemns these acts of violence. We reiterate the need for a thorough investigation and that the perpetrators are held accountable. What is needed now is a safe and stable Syria, one that can heal from the horrific crimes of the past and look to the future. This is true for all Syrians and for the wider region. Mr. President, allow me to make 3 points. First, we reiterate our full support for Syria's territorial integrity, political independence, and sovereignty. While we acknowledge Israel's legitimate security concerns, we remain concerned by the recent Israeli attacks in Syria with reported civilian casualties. Let us be clear. Attacks against strategic infrastructure are not going to create a more stable Syria. These developments will only further fuel tensions and insecurity. Instead, the focus should be on our collectively addressing security concerns, including presence of ISIL and other terrorist groups, and the reported remaining chemical weapons in Syria. Second, Mr. President, we reiterate our full support for UNDOF and for the 1974 agreement. We call for the full implementation of the 1974 agreement between Syria and Israel. For decades, UNDOF has worked to address both Israel's and Syria's security concerns. We are deeply concerned by Israeli statements that its presence in the area of separation in the Golan Heights could be for an unlimited period. UNDOF must be allowed to implement its mandate unhindered. Accordingly, Israel must withdraw from the area of separation. Third, Mr. President, let me reaffirm Denmark's steadfast support for a genuine political transition in Syria in line with Resolution 2254, the national dialogue, the constitutional declaration, and the recent announcement of the Syrian transitional government are all steps to this end.
We further underline the importance of a truly inclusive transition where Syrian women are fully represented. This is all taking place against the backdrop of a dire economic situation with profound humanitarian consequences for the people of Syria. While the response to immediate needs remains critical, this crisis can only be addressed through sustained support for recovery and reconstruction. The UN, through Special Envoy Peterson, is well placed to assist the transitional Syrian leaderships in charting the complex path forward. Mr. President, in closing, significant strides have been made along Syria's path to a new future. However, challenges remain, both politically and in terms of security. The international community, in particular this Council, has a responsibility to support the people of Syria on this path. Denmark remains committed to this end. I thank you.
Je remercie Madame la représentante permanente du Danemark pour sa déclaration et je donne la parole à Monsieur le représentant permanent de la République de Corée.
I would also like to thank ASC Chiari and USG Lacroix for their informative briefings. After 4 months, the Syrian people have finally witnessed the launch of a transitional cabinet, a critical first step for a long-awaited inclusive transition. However, Syria once again finds itself caught in a web of escalating geopolitical tensions, hampering its prospects for recovery and reconciliation after decades of unbearable suffering. I would like to make 3 points in this regard. First, all hostilities violating Syria's territorial sovereignty must stop. Since the fall of the Assad regime, Syria has neither attacked neighboring states nor indicated any intention to resort to aggressive action against them. In stark contrast, Israel has persistently conducted over 500 airstrikes since that time and is maintaining a military presence far beyond the Bravo line, a clear violation of the 1974 disengagement agreement. While we acknowledge Israel's security concerns, including risks of terrorism, we emphasize that such concerns cannot serve as justification for the use of force against a neighboring state and its civilians, particularly in the absence of a clear evidence of an imminent threat. The right to self-defense, as enshrined in international law, is temporary and contingent, not open-ended. As such, we express our grave concern over Israel's assertion that it will maintain an indefinite presence on Syrian land. And we urge Israel to live up to its obligations under the UN Charter and the 1974 Agreement. This includes returning to its prior commitment of ensuring freedom of movement for UNDOF. We also call upon the UN and those with influence over the parties on the ground to pursue a sustainable resolution that respects the sovereignty of Syria and promotes long-term regional stability. Second, we urge all parties to prioritize the safe and verifiable destruction of Syria's chemical weapons stockpiles. We express deep concern over Israel's airstrike last week, targeting the vicinity of Scientific Studies and Research Center in Barzah, a site known to have been involved in developing chemical and missile technologies during the Assad era, and which was inspected by OPCW Secretariat during their visit last month. As the OPCW Director General said last December, such airstrikes not only risk contamination, but lead to the destruction of valuable evidence for investigations related to past chemical weapons use. Moreover, they may impede the growing momentum in cooperation between the OPCW and Syria. We therefore urge all relevant actors to refrain from actions that may undermine the full implementation of the Chemical Weapons Convention in Syria. Third, we urge the transitional government to advance a more inclusive political process in line with Resolution 2254. While external threats continue to pose challenges, Syria's internal stability is equally at risk as a result of ongoing sectarian violence and exclusion from the political process, a situation that could be addressed through better planning and improved communication. In this regard, the United Nations stands as a capable and willing partner. With its long-standing experience in facilitating political transitions through both political engagement and technical assistance, the UN is uniquely positioned to provide vital support for narrowing existing capacity gaps and rebuilding trust. We welcome the Secretary General's initiative to conduct an integrated strategic assessment and hope this will spur progress on inclusive governance, security sector reform, and transitional justice. In closing, Mr. President, the track record of the interim authorities over the past 4 months shows that while progress has been limited, meaningful steps forward are possible, provided the international community remains constructively engaged and firmly supportive. We simply cannot afford to lose this historic opportunity to bring Syria back on a path of peace and legitimacy. This process must not be derailed as a result of Syria regressing into a geopolitical battlefield. I thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie Monsieur le représentant permanent de la République de Corée pour sa déclaration et je donne la parole à Madame la représentante du Royaume-Uni.
Thank you, President, and thank you to Under-Secretary General Lacroix and Assistant Secretary General Chiari for your briefing today. I will make 3 points. First, since this Council last met, Syria has made further positive progress in its political transition. The UK welcomes the announcement on the formation of the new Syrian government, and we look forward to the protection of human rights, unfettered access of humanitarian aid, the safe destruction of chemical weapons, and the combating of terrorism and extremism. The government's formation marks an important milestone in the transition. We hope this spirit of inclusive representation will be carried forward in state institutions and in any further appointments, including to the Legislative Committee and towards a clear timeline for the next phases of the transition. The UK stands ready to work with the Syrian government to this end and to support an inclusive, stable and prosperous future for the Syrian people. Second, this opportunity for stability is being threatened by the continued violence. We are concerned by Israeli strikes and incursions into Syria with reports of civilian deaths. These actions risk destabilising Syria and the wider region, and this is in no one's interest. We recognise Israel's focus on protecting the security of its borders and its people, but the actions it takes must be proportionate and in line with international law. We call on all actors to uphold the 1974 disengagement agreement, respect Syrian territorial integrity, and to prioritise diplomacy over force. Third, it is the Syrian people who will suffer the most from this worrying escalation. After 14 years of tyranny and conflict at the hands of the Assad regime, the Syrian people still face a staggering humanitarian crisis. And that is why the UK has recently pledged up to $207 million in critical humanitarian assistance. Our focus should now be on supporting Syrians to rebuild their country. Therefore, we call on all parties to ensure that humanitarian access remains possible across Syria and that civilian lives are protected. The UK will continue to work with our international partners to support Syrians as they look to build a better future. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for her statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of France. I thank USG for peace operations, Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix, as well as the ASG for the Middle East, Asia and the Pacific, Mr. Khaled Chiari, for their briefings, which have underscored the seriousness of the security situation in Syria. Syria is engaged in an historic transitional process since the overthrow of the Bashar al-Assad dictatorship. This opportunity has raised hopes for the Syrian people following decades of violence. The aspirations of the Syrians deserve support, and that is what France intends to do. In this unstable regional environment, political transition must enable Syria to become a center for peace and security. That means the cessation of all hostilities in Syria and respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Syria in accordance with the principles of the UN Charter and the relevant resolutions of the UN Security Council. These are essential elements to guarantee a peaceful political transition and stabilization in the country. Fragmentation of Syria is not in anyone's interest. We reiterate our appeal to Israel to end its military activities on Syrian territory and to withdraw from the area of separation pursuant to the 1974 disengagement agreement with respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Syria. Syria and Israel must take account of each other's security concerns. In this transitional period, we must above all make sure that Syria does not fall prey to fragmentation. With that in mind, our Council has asked that full light be shed on the unacceptable violence which cost the lives of civilians, which took place in the month of March as a result of, on the basis of religion. Those who are responsible must be brought to justice, and we will closely examine the conclusions of the Commission established by the caretaker authorities to investigate these crimes and the actions that will be taken. In northeast Syria, the agreement in principle signed between the caretaker authorities and the Syrian Democratic Forces is a positive first step towards a negotiated solution for the unification of Syria and guaranteeing the rights and interests of the Kurds of Syria. The terrorist threat remains high, and it is essential for the Damascus authorities to fight tirelessly against this threat, particularly against Daesh, and to resolve the issue of foreign terrorist fighters. The international community is expecting, particularly from the Syrian authorities, the dismantling of the chemical weapons program in full cooperation with the OPCW. And finally, in order to achieve just and lasting peace in Syria, it is essential to guarantee the inclusivity of the political transition. Initial encouraging results have been achieved with the holding of the first national dialogue session and the announcement of a new government. This government must consolidate commitments of the Syrian caretaker authorities and respond to the expectations and needs of the Syrian people. One of the expectations is the setting up of a transitional government. Those who have been convicted of crimes must not go unpunished, and France supports combating impunity in Syria and cooperation with the Syrian authorities. In tandem, national dialogue must be pursued and must involve all components of Syrian society. France recalls its commitment to an inclusive and representative political transition in the spirit of the principles of Resolution 2254. We support Mr. Peterson's efforts to support this process, and we trust that cooperation between Syrian authorities and the United Nations will build trust and solidify the support of the international community's support for Syria. I resume my function as President of the Council. I now give the floor to the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Monsieur le Président, أود بداية أن أهنئكم على توليكم رئاسة مجلس الأمن للشهر الجاري، متمنيا لكم ولفريقكم كل التوفيق. وأود أن أشكر سلفكم المندوب الدائمة للدنمارك وفريقها على حسن إدارتها أعمال المجلس الشهر الفائت، وأشكركم على الاستجابة السريعة لطلب عقد هذه الجلسة الطارئة. والشكر موصول لوفدي الجزائر والصومال الشقيقين والمجموعة العربية في نيويورك على طلب عقدها استجابة لرغبة بلاد سوريا. كما أشكر السيد جان بيير لاكروا وكيل الأمين العام لشؤون عمليات حفظ السلام والسيد خالد خياري مساعد الأمين العام على إحاطتيهما. واسمحوا لي أن أرحب بوجود السيدة اللواء أنيتا أسما قائدة قوات الأوندوف معنا في هذه القاعة اليوم، وأن أشكرها وفريقها على جهودهم في النهوض بولاية الأوندوف. السيد الرئيس،
Mr. President,
لقد أكدت غالبية الدول الأعضاء في الأمم المتحدة في إطار هذا المجلس وخارجه على مدى الأشهر الأربعة الماضية على ضرورة دعم سوريا والشعب السوري في هذه المرحلة الحساسة من حاضره ومستقبله. وشهدنا جميعا الإجماع الدولي على ضرورة تضافر الجهود لإنهاء المعاناة التي يعيشها السوريون والتي طالت كثيرا، ودعم استقرار سوريا وأمنها ووحدة وسلامة أراضيها، لما لذلك من انعكاس إيجابي على استقرار المنطقة وأمن ورفاه شعوبها. بالتزامن مع تلك التصريحات والمبادرات الإيجابية البناءة التي اعتمدتها دول أعضاء ومنظمات إقليمية ودولية وتجمعات سياسية لدعم سوريا وشعبها، بما في ذلك خلال القمة العربية التي استضافتها القاهرة واجتماع وزراء خارجية منظمة التعاون الإسلامي في جدة ومؤتمرات العقبة والرياض وباريس ومؤتمر بروكسل للمانحين والفعاليات الدولية التي استضافتها كل من دافوس وميونخ. بالتزامن مع كل ذلك فقد أمعنت سلطات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي في أعمالها العدوانية التي تتحدى تلك الجهود الدولية وترمي إلى تهديد وحدة وسلامة الأراضي السورية وتقويض جهود الحكومة السورية وفرض واقع جديد يتناقض وآمال السوريين وطموحاتهم في العيش في وطنهم بأمان وسلام. السيد الرئيس، لقد صعدت سلطات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي من وتيرة اعتداءاتها على سيادة الجمهورية العربية السورية ووحدة وسلامة أراضيها في تهديد خطير للسلم والأمن الدوليين وانتهاك جسيم للقانون الدولي وميثاق الأمم المتحدة وقراراتها ذات الصلة واتفاق فض الاشتباك لعام 1974 حيث شنت قوات الاحتلال منذ كانون الأول ديسمبر الفائت مئات الاعتداءات الجوية على بلادنا والتي لم يكن آخرها شنها فجر الخميس 3 نيسان أبريل الجاري وفي غضون 30 دقيقة عددا من الاعتداءات الجوية على 5 مناطق مختلفة في أنحاء البلاد، مما أسفر عن تدمير شبه كامل لمطار حماة العسكري وإصابة عشرات المدنيين والعسكريين وإلحاق دمار وأضرار بالغة لمنشآت عسكرية ومدنية أخرى في محافظتي دمشق وحمص. وبالتزامن مع هذا العدوان توغلت وحدات من قوات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي في ريف درعا وقصفت منطقة حرش السد الجبيلية غرب درعا، ما أسفر عن استشهاد 9 مدنيين وإصابة آخرين. وقد سبق هذا العدوان عدوان آخر على بلدة القوية في ريف درعا أسفر عن استشهاد 7 مدنيين. لقد سلط تقرير الأمين العام الأخير المتعلق بقوة الأندف الضوء على جانب من الاعتداءات الإسرائيلية على سوريا، حيث أشار بوضوح إلى توغل قوات جيش الاحتلال الإسرائيلي في المنطقة العازلة وتغيير الوضع فيها بشكل كبير والتأثير على عمليات القوة منذ 8 من ديسمبر كانون الأول الماضي، وذلك في انتهاكات لقرارات مجلس الأمن ذات الصلة. سجل التقرير أيضا شكاوى أهلنا في المناطق التي توغل فيها جيش الاحتلال الإسرائيلي والناجم عن منعه للمزارعين من الوصول لأراضيهم الزراعية وموارد رزقهم والإضرار بها واعتقال مواطنين سوريين وسرقة ممتلكاتهم وتدمير الطرق وتعطيل خدمات الكهرباء والمياه والإنترنت واحتلال مبان تابعة لمحافظة القنيطرة وتخريبها. ولم تقتصر الممارسات الإسرائيلية في الأراضي التي توغلت فيها مؤخرا على ما سبق، بل تعدتها إلى تهديد الأمن المائي لسوريا ودول الجوار من خلال السيطرة على الموارد المائية في جنوب سوريا وتحويل مجاري الأنهار من منابع المياه في جبل الشيخ والمسطحات المائية في المنطقة الجنوبية، الأمر الذي من شأنه تهديد الأمن الغذائي والمائي في سوريا. من جهة أخرى يواصل كيان الاحتلال الإسرائيلي ممارساته الاستفزازية ضد سوريا وشعبها من خلال القيام بتثبيت نقاط عسكرية وقواعد لقواته والترويج لتنظيم جولات سياحية للمستوطنين في المناطق التي دخلها وتوغل فيها، مما يكشف زيف ادعاءات كيان الاحتلال بأن توغله مؤقت ومحدود، ويفضح نواياه العدوانية والتوسعية وازدرائه لميثاق الأمم المتحدة وركائز القانون الدولي وقرارات مجلس الأمن والجمعية العامة ذات الصلة. سيد الرئيس، إن سوريا وإذ تؤكد على مضمون رسائلها الأربعة الأخيرة ذات الصلة وآخرها الشكوى التي وجهتها إلى السيد رئيس مجلس الأمن ومعالي الأمين العام في السابع من الشهر الجاري، والتي ستصدر بالوثيقة S/2025/2016، فإنها تجدد إدانتها بأشد العبارات للاعتداءات الإسرائيلية السافرة وللتصريحات الاستفزازية الصادرة عن مسؤولي كيان الاحتلال، والمطالبة بما أسمته نزع سلاح الدولة السورية من محافظات جنوب السوري، والترويج لادعاءات كاذبة بالحرص على مكونات بعينها من النسيج الوطني السوري وزعم حمايتها. إن سوريا وإذ تتقدم بالشكر للدول التي وقفت إلى جانبها وأدانت الاعتداءات الإسرائيلية ودعت لوقفها، فإنها تطالب مجلس الأمن بإدانة هذه الاعتداءات والتحرك الفوري والحازم لإلزام إسرائيل بالوقف الفوري لعدوانها المستمر على الأراضي السورية والانسحاب الفوري وغير المشروط من جميع الأراضي السورية والالتزام التام باتفاق فض الاشتباك لعام 1974 واحترام ولايتي قوتي الأندف والأنسو ووضع قرارات المجلس ذات الصلة ولا سيما القرارات 242 338 497 موضع التنفيذ لإنهاء الاحتلال الإسرائيلي للجولان السوري المحتل وما يترتب عن ذلك الاحتلال من تهديد سافر لوحدة سوريا وسيادتها وأمنها. إن سوريا تجدد التأكيد على حقها السابق ببسط سيادتها على كامل أراضيها وترفض أي محاولات إسرائيلية للتدخل في شؤونها الداخلية وزعزعة أمنها واستقرارها أو فرض واقع احتلالي جديد. وتؤكد سوريا تمسكها بميثاق الأمم المتحدة وأحكام القانون الدولي وقرارات الشرعية الدولية كأساس لتحقيق الاستقرار والسلام في المنطقة. ولا يفوتني أن أشيد بجهود حفظة السلام من طواقم الأندف والأنسو وقيادتها في نيويورك وفي الميدان وما يبدونه من عزيمة وحرص على النهوض بمهام ولايتهم على الرغم من التحديات الكبيرة التي يواجهونها جراء ممارسات قوات الاحتلال بما في ذلك تقييد قوات الاحتلال لحركة القوتين. وتؤكد سوريا استعدادها للعودة لنشر قواتها على خط الفصل والتزامها باتفاق فض الاشتباك. ختاما السيد الرئيس، مع كل يوم يتأخر فيه مجلس الأمن عن الاطلاع بمسؤولياته في حفظ السلم والأمن الدوليين ووقف العدوان الإسرائيلي المتواصل على بلاده، تزداد احتمالات عدم الاستقرار ويتفاقم التهديد الذي يمثله ذلك العدوان على بلاد سوريا وعلى المنطقة وشعوبها. فمحاولات فرض الحلول بالقوة وتغليب قوة القانون على قانون القوة على قوة القانون مآلها الفشل فضلا عن كونها لا تخدم الاستقرار الإقليمي وتتعارض مع الجهود المضنية التي يتم بذلها لترسيخ قيم وثقافة السلام في المنطقة ودفعها نحو الرفاه والتنمية. شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you, President.
Je remercie Monsieur le Président de la Syrie
thank the representative of Syria and I give the floor to the Permanent Representative of Libya.
سيد الرئيس
Mr. President,
في البداية
at the
اسمحوا لي
outset,
أن أتقدم بهذا البيان باسم المجموعة العربية
submit the statement on behalf of the Arab group.
وأتقدم بالشكر
I would like
على
to
تلبية دعوة كل من الجزائر والصومال
for answering
هذه الجلسة الطائرة
the call of Somalia and Algeria to hold this important meeting called for also by the Arab group. I'd also like to thank Mr. Khaled Khiyari and Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix for their briefings. Mr. President, the Arab group expresses its deep condemnation of the military escalation of the occupying Israeli forces, the repeated aggression against Syria, especially the latest attack that has targeted several areas on the 3rd of April, and we would like to recall that such attacks are a blatant violation of international law and the UN Charter. They are undoubtedly a threat to the peace and security of the entire region. It also adds to the suffering of the Syrian people who are already suffering because of the ongoing crisis. The attacks of the occupation forces that targeted 5 different positions, including the destruction of the Hama military airport almost completely and the huge damage to several civilian and military positions in Homs and Damascus are only part of a series of attacks that aim at undermining the security of Syria. It also is a threat to the safety and security of the Syrian people and hinders the regional and international effort to bring about stability in the region. The Arab group underlines that such attacks are not only a violation of the peace, security and territorial integrity of Syria, but also a total and blatant undermining of the security of Syria and the resolutions of this Council,
والتي تدعو إلى إنهاء الاحتلال الإسرائيلي للجولان السوري كما أنها تمثل خرقا فاضحا لاتفاق فض الاشتباك لعام 1974
this agreement forces agreement. This is a clear violation of the mandate of the UN forces, whether they are the UNDOF or the UNSO. Mr. President, the Arab group condemns in the strongest words such attacks and call upon the international community and the Security Council in particular to shoulder their legal and moral responsibility and bring pressure to bear on the Israeli occupation forces to stop their aggression immediately and to adhere to the international law and ensure a full and unconditional withdrawal of their forces from all Syrian territories, including the recent movement that only aim at abusing the current developments in Syria and expand their occupation. Therefore, your Council must take immediate and urgent steps to put an end to such provocative actions before things go out of control and threaten international peace and security, whether in the region or beyond. The Arab group also stresses, in parallel with the development of the transitional stage after the fall of the previous regime and the continued effort to bring about development, to lift economic sanctions against Syria as soon as possible, because they are a hindrance to the revival of the economy of Syria and their development. The Arab group also stresses the need to continue the comprehensive political process with the Syrian-led, Syrian-owned process that is all-encompassing of all factions in Syria in line with Security Council Resolution 2254. This will be part of international effort aimed at supporting peace and prosperity in Syria. In this vein and in the same context,
Bonjour, la 9896e séance du Conseil de sécurité est ouverte. L'ordre du jour provisoire de la présente séance est la situation au Moyen-Orient. L'ordre du jour est adopté. Conformément à l'article 37 du règlement intérieur provisoire du Conseil, j'invite les représentants d'Israël, de la Libye, de la Syrie et de la Turquie à participer à la présente séance. Il en est ainsi décidé. Conformément à l'article 39 du règlement intérieur provisoire du Conseil, j'invite les intervenants suivants à participer à la présente séance. Monsieur Khaled Khiari, sous-secrétaire général pour le Moyen-Orient et l'Asie et le Pacifique, au département des affaires politiques et de la consolidation de la paix, et Monsieur Jean-Pierre Lacroix, secrétaire général adjoint aux opérations de paix. Il en est ainsi décidé. Le Conseil de sécurité va maintenant aborder l'examen du point 2 de l'ordre du jour. Je donne la parole à M. Khaled Khiari.
Monsieur le Président, distingués membres du Conseil de sécurité, since the fall of the former Assad government on 8th of December 2024, this Security Council has been regularly briefed on Israeli violation of 1974 disengagement of forces agreement between Israel and Syria, as you will hear from Under-Secretary General for Peace Operations Jean-Pierre Lacroix. The Secretary General has been clear on his condemnation of all actions that are inconsistent with the agreement. There have been hundreds of reported Israeli airstrikes across Syria since 8th of December of last year, in the southwest, the Syrian coast, northeastern Syria, Damascus, Hama, and Homs. The IDF has publicly confirmed it has built multiple positions in the area of separation on the Golan. Israeli officials have also spoken about Israel's intentions to stay in Syria for the foreseeable future. Such facts on the ground are not easily reversed. They do threaten Syria's fragile political transition. Most recently, as conveyed to this Council by the Syrian Permanent Mission on 7th of April, at dawn on 3 April, there were reports that Israel carried out multiple airstrikes across Syria, including in Damascus, the Hama military airport, and the T4 military airport in Homs. Israeli simultaneous attacks in Daraa reportedly resulted in 9 civilian casualties. The Syrian interim authorities condemned these attacks, qualifying them as blatant violation of international law and Syrian sovereignty, and an attempt to destabilize Syria. Let me also recall earlier indications by the Damascus authorities, as had been published in numerous media outlets, of not presenting threats to its neighbors and seeking peace on their borders. The Israeli Defense Minister was quoted on 3rd of April as qualifying the recent airstrikes in Syria as a warning for the future, and as he added that Israel would not allow Syria to become a threat to Israel's security interests. Considering these developments, let me recall this Council's presidential statement on 14th of March, which reaffirmed a strong commitment to the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of Syria, and called on all states to respect these principles and to refrain from any action or interference that may further destabilize Syria. This Council's commitment to Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity grows in importance by the day. Syria's opportunities to stabilize after 14 years of conflict must be supported and protected for Syrians and for Israelis. This is the only way regional peace and security can be realized. Mr. President, let me conclude by recalling the statement made by Special Envoy Pedersen on 3rd of April about Israeli military escalation, that such actions undermine efforts to build a new Syria at peace with itself and the region and destabilize Syria at a sensitive time. Syria is at a crossroads and deserves a chance to continue to work towards an inclusive political transition, where the Syrian people can overcome the conflicts, revive their economy, realize their legitimate aspirations, and contribute to regional stability. Furthermore, short-term and tactical security actions and gains should not derail prospects for peace agreement between the two neighbors and long-term stability at their internationally recognized border. Je vous remercie.
Thank you.
Je remercie Monsieur le Sous-secrétaire général pour ses
the
remarques.
ASG for his comments, and I now give the floor to Mr. Lacroix, the USG for Peace Operations.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie le Conseil de sécurité
I
de
thank the Security
donner
Council
l'occasion de
for
vous
giving me
informer de la
this
situation dans la
opportunity
zone
to
d'opération de la
report
Force
to
des
you on the
Nations Unies
situation in
pour
the
l'observation
UNDOF area
du
of
désengagement et de la
operations.
mise en œuvre de son mandat.
UNDOF, the UN
The situation
Disengagement
in the
Observer
UNDOF
Force,
area
in
of operations
implementing
since
its
the
mandate.
closed Security Council consultation on UNDOF on the 19th of March has remained volatile and continues to be characterized by significant violations of the 1974 disengagement of forces agreement with the entry of the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, into the area of separation since the 8th of December. The Israeli Defense Forces currently occupies 12 positions that they established on the Bravo side, 10 in the areas of separation and 2 in the area of limitation in the vicinity of the Bravo line. They also continue to construct counter-mobility obstacles along the ceasefire line and have flown on several occasions aircraft across the ceasefire line and helicopters into the area of separation. The IDF also continue to impose some restrictions of movement on UNDOF and Observer Group Golan personnel in the area of separation. Their restrictions on the movement of people residing in the area also continue. Residents in some areas have protested disruptions from IDS activities, including farming, detention of civilians, and seizure of large numbers of livestock, and we have conveyed these concerns to our Israeli interlocutors. Some residents have also appealed to UNDOF to ask the IDF to leave their villages. Monsieur le Président, dans cet environnement opérationnel difficile, le personnel de la flotte, soutenu par le groupe d'observateurs
personnel
du Golan,
supported
continue
by
de
the
mener à
Observer
bien
Group
au mieux de
Golan
ses capacités
have continued to
les
carry out
activités
to
qui
the
lui ont
best
été
of their
confiées,
abilities
à
activities
savoir l'observation de
entrusted
la zone de
to it,
séparation et de la
namely
ligne de
observation of the
cessez-le-feu
area
à
of
partir de ses
separation and the
positions,
ceasefire line
ainsi
from
que
their
les
positions, as
patrouilles
well
et
as
les rapports sur
patrols and
l'évolution de la
reports
situation.
on the evolving situation.
Permettez-moi de faire le point sur l'évolution de la
Allow me
situation
to update
sécuritaire
you
dans la
on the
zone
evolving
d'opération
security
de la FNUOD.
situation in UNDOF's
Au cours
area
des
of
dernières
operation.
semaines, le personnel de la FNUOD a
In recent
observé de
weeks, UNDOF
multiples
personnel
explosions
have
du côté
noted
Bravo, qu'il
multiple
a estimé
explosions on the
être une
Bravo
activité
side,
kinétique
which they
significative
deem to
liée aux
be
efforts des
significant
forces de
kinetic
défense
activity
d'Israël
linked to the
en vue
efforts of the
de, je
IDF
cite, la
to, and I quote,
démilitarisation du sud de la Syrie.
demilitarize the south of Syria.
On the 27th of March, following an IDF attack on a location in the area of limitation, the IDF stated, and I quote, that during a planned IDF activity, a number of armed individuals opened fire from Kohaya on IDF forces. The IDF sent an aerial instrument to scan the field. The aerial instrument was attacked. Most recently, early morning on the 3rd of April, UNDOF personnel in the area of separation observed IDF troops in vehicles moving in a southeasterly direction on the Bravo side. The UNDOF personnel later heard and observed multiple explosions in the southern part of the area of limitation on the Bravo side. UNDOF assessed these explosions to be a result of the impact of IDF artillery fire, likely in Nawa and Tassil. On the 3rd of April, the IDF informed UNDOF that, and I quote, "In the past few hours, the IDF has struck remaining military capabilities in the areas of the Syrian military bases, Hama and T4, along with additional military infrastructure in the Damascus area. The IDF will continue to act to eliminate any threat to the citizens of the State of Israel," end of quote. Additionally, open sources reported on the 3rd of April incidents of residents in Dera, including Tassil and Nawa, clashing with the IDF convoy that attempted to enter the towns, forcing the convoy to retreat under IDF air cover. UNDOF continues to liaise with both parties and engages on specific issues impacting UNDOF operations and on complaints conveyed to UNDOF by a resident in the area of separation. In their engagement with the UNDOF leadership, senior IDF officials have restated that their presence in the area of separation was necessary to secure it from what they described as terrorist elements, and informed that Israel had no territorial ambitions in Syria. They have reiterated Israel's expectation of the demilitarization of the area southwest of Damascus. On the Bravo side, UNDOF is reinforcing its coordination mechanism through a new liaison arrangement with Syrian authorities. This includes enhancing information sharing protocols and regular consultative meetings. It remains critical that all parties uphold their obligation under the 1974 Disengagement of Forces Agreement, including by ending all unauthorized presence in the areas of separation and limitation, as well as refraining from any action that would undermine the ceasefire and stability on the Syrian Golan. There should be no military forces or activities in the area of separation other than those on UNDOF. All actions that are inconsistent with the agreement are unacceptable. UNDOF must have freedom of movement in its area of operations. The freedom of movement and safety and security of UNDOF and Observer Group Golan personnel conducting their mandated task is of the highest priority. Monsieur le Président, pour finir, je compte sur la coopération continue des deux parties pour que la force puisse s'acquitter pleinement de son mandat. L'avenir reste essentiel pour la stabilité du Golan et de la région. Nous sommes reconnaissants au Conseil de sécurité pour le soutien continu qu'il apporte à l'AFMUOD et je réitère que ce soutien unanime est plus que nécessaire, plus que jamais nécessaire dans cette période difficile. Je vous remercie.
Merci, Monsieur le Secrétaire général adjoint, pour son intervention. Et je donne maintenant la parole
for his comments, and I give the floor to council members wishing to speak. I give the floor to the permanent representative of Algeria.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the members of the A3+, namely Guyana, Sierra Leone, Somalia, and my own country, Algeria. At the outset, we would like to thank USG Jean-Pierre Lacroix and ASG Khaled Khiari for their valuable briefings. Mr. President, the A3+ is concerned about the military escalations by Israel in Syria, which are taking place at a critical period of Syria's history and exacerbate the already fragile situation in this country. We understand that the recent airstrikes have reportedly resulted in 9 civilians' casualties and damage the civilian infrastructure. The A3+ strongly condemn these military operations that violate international law, including the United Nations Charter, in particular Article 2.4, which prohibits the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. In this regard, we stress the importance of ensuring full respect for Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity. We also echo the Special Envoy's concern that such actions undermines efforts to build a new Syria that is at peace with itself, at peace with the region. It is crucial to highlight that Syria has neither threatened nor attacked Israel. Furthermore, we must recognize that the ongoing violence exacerbates the humanitarian crisis, which has already displaced millions and left countless others in desperate need of assistance. it is vital to reiterate that both civilians and civilian infrastructure must be protected in accordance with international humanitarian law. The A3+ is further concerned about the impact that the destruction of Syria's military capabilities would have on the country's stability and its ability to ensure security, to combat terrorism effectively. The A3+ reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the unity, to the sovereignty, to the independence, and to the territorial integrity of Syria. These principles must be respected by all, under all circumstances. Upholding international law is not a matter of choice, but an obligation. And this escalatory action of Israel, compounded by inflammatory statement by Israeli officials about the, and I quote, indefinite presence of their forces in Syrian territory, are contributing to instability and threatening regional peace and security. The A3+ therefore calls for, first, the immediate cessation of attacks against Syria's infrastructures. Such actions destabilize the country and may incite further unrest and conflict among neighboring countries. Second, full respect for the 1974 disengagement agreement, including provisions related to the zone of separation. In this regard, we underscore that there should be no military forces, no military equipment or personnel in the area of separation other than those of handoff.